He didn't move. Not when the coffin was lowered. Not when the last pair of boots turned away and the gravel settled into silence. He didn't move when the wind came off the water and cut through the rows of white markers like a blade made of winter. He just stood there, a German shepherd with a dark sable coat dusted and cold, eyes fixed on a name carved in stone, as if it might breathe again if he waited long enough. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Somewhere warm, I hope. Somewhere with light. Because this story begins in a place where light fades early and memories linger longer than they should. The cemetery sat on the edge of a small coastal town in North Carolina, where the Atlantic whispered against the shore and the air carried the faint scent of salt and old wood. It was just past 6 p.m., and the sky had already turned the color of steel. A thin fog rolled in low, curling around the headstones, softening the world into something quieter, something heavier. People had come earlier, dressed in dark coats and careful words, standing shoulder to shoulder as the flag was folded and handed to a man who didn't seem to feel his own hands. They had spoken Daniel Hayes's name with respect, with sorrow, with the kind of finality that leaves no room for doubt. 35 years old, U.S. Marine, served 2 tours overseas. A man who had seen too much and still managed to come home with something soft left in him. A man who never went anywhere without his dog. Now they were gone. Engines had started. Doors had closed. The low murmur of voices had faded into the distance, replaced by the steady hush of wind through bare branches. And still, the dog remained. Rex stood about 10 yards from the fresh mound of earth, paws planted firmly in the damp grass, body still as if carved from the same stone that marked the grave. His ears were upright, alert, but not tense. His tail hung low, unmoving. There was no whining, no pacing, no restless circling like the others had expected. Just stillness. The kind that made people uncomfortable. The kind that made them look away. "Come on, boy," one of the Marines had said earlier, crouching down, hand extended, voice gentle but firm. "It's time to go." Rex hadn't even turned his head. Not then. Not when the leash was clipped to his collar. Not when a soft tug tried to guide him away from the spot where the scent of his handler still lingered faintly in the cold air. He had resisted, not with force, but with weight. Dead weight. A refusal so quiet it felt like something sacred. In the end, they unclipped the leash. Someone muttered, "Give him a minute." But minutes turned into an hour. And now, as the last light drained from the sky, Rex was alone. Alone, except for the memory of a voice that had once called him by name with a certainty no one else could replicate. Daniel Hayes. If you had met him 6 months earlier, you would have noticed the way he carried himself first. Not rigid, not stiff, but grounded. Like a man who knew exactly where his feet belonged, even when the ground shifted beneath him. He had light skin weathered by sun and time, a jawline marked by a faint scar that caught the light just right, and eyes that held a steady gray-green calm. On his right forearm, just beneath the rolled sleeve of his uniform, there was a tattoo of a German shepherd's face. Ears up, eyes sharp, expression focused. It wasn't just ink. It was a promise, a memory etched into skin. Rex had been with him for 4 years. Not just as a K-9 unit, not just as a trained partner, but as something closer to a reflection. They moved the same way, paused at the same moments, trusted the same instincts. Out there, in places where the air tasted like dust and decisions came down to seconds, Rex had learned the sound of Daniel's breathing, the shift of his weight, the subtle change in tone that meant danger or safety or something in between. And Daniel, in turn, had learned that when Rex stopped moving, it meant something no human eye had caught yet. That kind of bond doesn't end with a ceremony. It doesn't fold neatly into a flag or settle quietly beneath 6 feet of earth. It lingers. It waits. Back in the cemetery, the temperature dropped another few degrees. The fog thickened, wrapping the world in a damp hush. Somewhere in the distance, a buoy bell rang out. Over the water, slow and hollow. Rex's breath came in steady, visible puffs, each one fading into the night air. His gaze never left the headstone. The name, the dates, the line beneath that tried to summarize a life in a few measured words. He didn't understand the words, not the way humans did, but he understood absence. He understood the missing rhythm of footsteps beside him, the silence where a voice should be, and he remembered the last command he had been given. It hadn't been shouted. It hadn't needed to be. Just one word, spoken low, steady, certain. Stay. So he did. Even now. Even here. Even when every instinct might have told another dog to seek warmth, to follow a new hand, to adapt. Rex stayed. Because somewhere in the space between memory and instinct, between training and something deeper, he was still listening, waiting for the sound that would tell him it was time to move again. And until that moment came, he didn't move. The night deepened slowly, the way it does near the coast, where darkness does not fall all at once but seeps in, inch by inch, until the world forgets what color it used to be. The wind shifted, carrying the distant crash of waves against unseen rocks, a steady rhythm that felt older than memory itself. Rex did not react. His paws remained planted in the damp earth, muscles locked not from tension, but from something quieter, something chosen. A passing car rolled along the narrow road beyond the cemetery gates, its headlights sweeping briefly across the rows of headstones, catching the edge of polished granite and the faint glint of moisture on Rex's fur. For a moment, light touched his eyes, and in that flicker, something stirred. Not movement. Not yet. But memory. It begins the way most memories do. Not as a full picture, but as fragments. A sound. A scent. The weight of a presence that once stood just within reach. Months earlier, long before the cold earth enfolded flag, the air had been thick with summer heat, heavy enough to press against the skin. Camp Lejeune had carried its usual rhythm, boots against gravel, distant calls echoing across training grounds, the hum of engines and voices blending into something constant, something dependable. Daniel Hayes had stood at the edge of a wide training field, sleeves rolled just above his elbows, the ink on his right forearm catching the sunlight. The German shepherd etched there looked almost alive when he moved, the lines shifting with muscle and motion. Rex had been 10 feet away, sitting perfectly still despite the noise around him. His ears tracked every sound, every shift, but his eyes remained locked on Daniel. Waiting. Always waiting for the next word. Daniel had not looked at him right away. That was part of it. The trust between them did not need constant confirmation. It lived in the space between commands, in the silence where nothing was said but everything was understood. A whistle cut through the air, sharp and clean. Rex's ears flicked, but he did not move. Then Daniel spoke, his voice low, steady, the kind that carried without needing to be loud. Stay. It was a simple word. One syllable. But it held weight. Rex lowered his body slightly, settling deeper into position, muscles coiled but controlled, eyes never leaving the man in front of him. Around them, other Marines moved through drills, voices rising and falling, boots crunching across the field. But for Rex, the world narrowed to one figure, one voice, one command. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time did not matter. What mattered was the expectation that at some point, there would be a release. A signal. A shift in tone that meant he could move again, could close the distance, could return to the place beside Daniel's leg where he belonged. But Daniel did not give it right away. He walked away instead, slow, deliberate, testing not obedience, but trust. 20 yards. 30. 50. To anyone watching, it might have looked like distance. Like separation. But Rex understood it differently. Distance was not absence. Not when the bond remained unbroken. Not when the voice that had given the command still existed somewhere within reach. Back in the present, a thin layer of frost began to form along the edges of the grass, each blade catching the cold like a quiet surrender. Rex's breath slowed, steady and even, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that matched something deeper than instinct. The cemetery lights flickered on, casting a pale yellow glow that barely pushed back the darkness. Somewhere behind him, the gate creaked open again. Soft footsteps approached, careful, hesitant, the kind that did not want to disturb what could not be understood. He is still here, a voice whispered, older, worn with years and something softer beneath it. Another set of steps followed, slower, heavier. We cannot leave him out all night, the second voice replied, though there was no certainty in it. Rex heard them. Of course he did. His ears shifted slightly, catching the direction, measuring distance, recognizing unfamiliar patterns. But he did not turn, because they were not the voice he was waiting for. A hand reached out, stopping just short of touching his back. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Come on, boy, The first voice tried again, gentler this time. It is cold. Cold. The word meant nothing in the way it did to humans. Rex had known heat that burned through sand and air that carried dust for miles. He had known nights where the temperature dropped fast and the world turned quiet and watchful. Cold was just another condition, not a reason to leave, not a reason to break a command. The hand lingered for a moment longer, then slowly withdrew. The footsteps retreated, fading back toward the gate, leaving the space behind them empty once more. Silence returned, heavier than before. And in that silence, the memory sharpened. Daniel turning back, finally, the slightest shift in posture, the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. And then, the word that always came. The one Rex had not heard yet. Not here. Not now. So he stayed. Because somewhere in the space between what had been and what was, the command still held. And Rex had never once disobeyed it. The frost thickened along the ground, turning each blade of grass into something fragile, something that could shatter under the wrong step. Rex remained where he was, his body now outlined faintly by the pale cemetery lights, a still figure against a world that kept moving without him. Time passed in slow, unmeasured breaths. Minutes stretched into hours, and the sky above shifted from steel gray to a deeper, quieter black. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once, then faded, as if even sound had learned not to linger too long in this place. Rex's ears twitched slightly, not in reaction to the bell, but to something older, something buried beneath the present moment. Memory does not arrive all at once. It seeps in, like cold through fabric, until it reaches the bone. The training field was gone. The quiet cemetery dissolved. In its place came heat, dust, and the low hum of a place far from the ocean. The air there had been different, dry and sharp, carrying scents that clung to everything. Sand, metal, faint traces of oil and sun-warmed earth. Rex moved beside Daniel, close enough that their shadows overlapped under the harsh midday light. There were no markers here, no rows of white stone. Only open ground and structures that rose from it in straight, deliberate lines. Daniel's boots pressed into the dirt with each step, steady, measured. He did not rush. He never rushed when it mattered. His right sleeve was rolled again, the tattoo visible, dark against sun-worn skin. Rex had learned that when Daniel moved like this, slower, more aware, it meant something important was unfolding. Not danger in the way humans defined it, but a shift. A moment that required attention. Daniel paused, his body going still in a way Rex understood immediately. Stillness meant listen. Stillness meant wait. Rex mirrored him without command, lowering his head slightly, ears forward, senses stretching outward. There was a faint sound carried on the wind, something distant, something easy to miss if you were not trained to hear it. Daniel's hand moved, just slightly, fingers brushing against Rex's neck in a gesture that was not a command, but reassurance. I am here. Rex leaned into it for the briefest second, then stilled again. They moved forward together after that, step by step, the distance between them never changing. That was the way it had always been. Not leader and follower. Not exactly. Something closer to two halves of the same motion, each aware of the other without needing to look. The moment came without warning. It always does. A shift in the air. A sound that did not belong. Daniel's posture changed first, subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders squared, his weight shifted, and his voice followed, low and precise. Stay. Rex stopped instantly. No hesitation. No question. His body locked into place, muscles firm but controlled, eyes fixed on Daniel as he moved ahead alone. 10 feet. 20. The distance grew, but the command held. Rex's breathing slowed, his focus narrowing to a single point. Daniel's back, the line of his shoulders, the rhythm of his steps. Then Daniel turned, just enough for Rex to see his face. There was something there. Not fear, not doubt, something heavier, something that felt like a promise and a goodbye folded into one moment. Rex shifted slightly, a fraction of movement, instinct pressing against training. But the word remained in his mind. Stay? So he did. Daniel lifted his hand, a small gesture, one Rex had seen 100 times before. It meant wait. It meant trust me. It meant I will come back. Rex held his ground. Seconds passed. Maybe more. Time stretched thin, pulled tight between expectation and reality. The air felt different now, charged in a way Rex could not name, but understood deeply. Then something changed. Not a sound, not a visible movement. Just absence. The space where Daniel had been felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Rex's ears flicked forward, his body leaning just slightly, every instinct urging him to break position, to close the distance, to find the missing piece of the world that had always been there. But the command still held. Stay. Back in the cemetery, Rex's chest rose and fell in the same steady rhythm. The memory faded, leaving behind only the echo of that moment. The last time he had seen Daniel move away. The last time he had been told to remain. The difference was simple. Back then, there had always been a return. A step, a voice, a hand reaching back across the distance to close it again. Here, there was only silence. The kind that does not answer. The kind that stretches on without promise. The wind shifted again, colder now, carrying the faint scent of the ocean mixed with something else. Something familiar. Rex's ears lifted higher, his head tilting just a fraction, the first real movement he had made in hours. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. A change, not in the world around him, but in the space inside him where memory and instinct met. He inhaled slowly, drawing in the air, searching it the way he had been trained to do. Beneath the cold, beneath the damp earth and distant salt, there was something faint, something worn and distant, like a scent carried too far on the wind. Not strong enough to confirm, not clear enough to trust, but present. Rex did not move his paws. He did not step forward or turn away, but his body shifted ever so slightly, tension threading through stillness for the first time since the coffin had been lowered. Because somewhere, deep within the part of him that did not rely on sight or sound alone, something whispered that the command might not be over yet. And Rex had always listened. The scent lingered, faint and uncertain, like something remembered rather than something real. Rex held still, but inside him, something shifted again, deeper this time, like a ripple moving through still water. The cold no longer pressed the same way. The night no longer felt empty. He breathed in once more, slower, deliberate, searching beneath the layers of damp soil and salt air, past the quiet decay of fallen leaves and stone. There it was again, faint, worn, but familiar, not strong enough to confirm. Not yet. The cemetery remained unchanged, rows of pale markers stretching into the dark, the soft hum of distant waves blending with the low whisper of wind. But something unseen had entered the space. Not movement, not sound, presence. Rex's ears lifted higher, his head tilting slightly to the right, as if aligning himself with something only he could sense. His body remained rooted, paws unmoving, but the stillness was no longer empty. It was waiting, not the passive waiting of before, but something sharper, something aware. Hours earlier, in a different place, far from the quiet cemetery and the steady breath of the ocean, fluorescent lights hummed softly above a narrow hospital corridor. The air there smelled different. Clean. Filtered. Faint traces of antiseptic and plastic, the kind of scent that clung to walls and fabric alike. Machines whispered in steady rhythms, quiet beeps marking time in a way that felt controlled, measured, almost artificial. In one of the rooms, a man lay still, his breathing slow, guided by something unseen. His right arm rested beside him, sleeve rolled just enough to reveal a familiar shape inked into skin. The German Shepherd tattoo, dark and precise, the lines slightly faded from years under sun and sand, but unmistakable. Daniel Hayes had not moved much in the past 2 days. Not in the way people expected movement to look. No sudden gestures. No clear signs that the world beyond the closed eyes reached him. But beneath the stillness, something remained. A pulse. A rhythm. A quiet resistance that refused to disappear. A nurse passed by the doorway, glancing in briefly, her steps slowing for just a second before continuing down the hall. To her, he was another patient. Another name on a chart. Stable. Recovering. Words that carried meaning, but not story. They did not know about the field. About the heat and dust, and the command that had not yet been released. They did not know about the dog that had not moved. Back in the cemetery, Rex shifted again, barely perceptible, his weight adjusting slightly from one paw to the other. The frost beneath him cracked faintly, a soft sound swallowed quickly by the night. His gaze remained fixed forward, but his focus had changed. It was no longer locked on the stone alone. It stretched beyond it now, into something unseen, something that did not belong to the place in front of him. The scent grew stronger for a moment, then faded again, like a signal caught between distances. Rex inhaled sharply this time, his chest expanding, ears forward, eyes narrowing just slightly. There was no confusion in him. No doubt. Only a question that had not existed before. The command. It still held. But what if it was not finished? What if the silence was not the end, but a space between? The wind shifted again, carrying a different current through the rows of stone. Somewhere far off, a door closed. Not here. Not within sight. But the sound moved through the air in a way that felt connected, like a thread pulled gently from one place to another. Rex's body tensed for the first time, not in fear, not in resistance, but in recognition. The same way he had tensed on that distant field, when something unseen changed the shape of the moment. In the hospital room, Daniel's fingers twitched. It was small, barely noticeable, the kind of movement that could be dismissed as nothing more than a reflex. But it happened again, slight, controlled, as if something inside him had reached outward, testing the boundary between stillness and motion. The monitor beside him continued its steady rhythm, unchanged, unaware of the shift taking place beneath the surface. His breathing deepened slightly, not enough to draw attention, not enough to break the quiet pattern that had held for hours, but enough. Enough for something beyond the room to feel it. Back at the grave, Rex's head lifted a fraction higher. His ears locked forward, every muscle in his body now alive with a tension that had nothing to do with cold or fatigue. He did not step. He did not break position. But the stillness was no longer absolute. It was on the edge of change. The scent returned again, stronger this time, clearer, threading through the night air with a certainty that cut through everything else. It was not the earth, not the stone, not the fading trace left behind earlier that day. It was something present, something real. Rex's chest tightened, a low breath escaping him, not a whine, not a bark, but something in between. A sound that carried recognition without confirmation. The command echoed again, not in sound, but in memory. Stay? He had obeyed it through distance, through silence, through absence. But now, something in the world had shifted. Something that did not align with the finality he had been left with. In the hospital room, Daniel's eyes remained closed. But beneath the surface, something stirred, pulling him upward, inch by inch, toward awareness. Not fully, not yet, but enough to bridge the space between what had been and what still was. Back in the cemetery, Rex held his ground. But now, he was no longer waiting for an end. He was waiting for an answer. And for the first time since the earth had closed over the empty space they believed was Daniel Hayes, that answer felt close enough to reach. The air felt different now, charged in a way that did not belong to night or cold or silence. Rex stood at the edge of something unseen, his body still obeying the command that had defined his world, but his senses reaching beyond it, stretching toward a presence that refused to stay hidden. The scent was no longer a ghost of memory. It carried weight now. It moved with the wind, then against it, threading through the cemetery in a way that did not follow natural patterns. Rex inhaled again, deeper this time, his chest expanding as if trying to pull the truth out of the air itself. His ears locked forward, every muscle in his body aligned towards something distant, something that did not match the stillness of the grave before him. Somewhere, something had changed. Miles away, inside the quiet hum of the hospital, the shift continued. Daniel's breathing grew heavier, not strained, but fuller, as if his body had decided to take ownership again after a long absence. The machines beside him adjusted with soft clicks, their rhythms adapting to the subtle changes in his pulse. His fingers moved again, more deliberate now, a slow curl and release, as if remembering what movement felt like after being still for too long. A nurse paused outside the room, noticing the change this time, her brow tightening slightly as she stepped closer, eyes moving from the monitor to the man on the bed. "Sir," she said softly, not expecting a response, but offering the word anyway, as if it might reach him. Daniel did not answer, not with words, but something inside him shifted again, a quiet pull toward awareness that refused to settle back into silence. Back in the cemetery, Rex's body trembled once, a brief, controlled movement that broke the perfect stillness he had held for hours. His paws did not lift, but his weight shifted forward, just enough to press into the earth beneath him. The frost cracked softly again, a fragile sound swallowed by the wind. His gaze moved for the first time, not away from the grave entirely, but beyond it, past the stone, past the line of markers, toward the distant road that cut along the edge of the cemetery. The scent led there. It did not belong to the ground beneath him anymore. It moved. It changed. It lived. Rex's breathing quickened slightly, his chest rising faster now, not from fear, but from recognition. This was not absence. This was not the quiet ending the humans believed in. This was something unfinished. The command echoed again, steady and unbroken. Stay? He had obeyed it without question, through cold and silence and the heavy certainty of loss. But now, something in that command shifted. Not the word itself, but its meaning. Stay had never meant forever. It had meant wait. Wait until called. Wait until it is safe. Wait until I come back. Rex's ears twitched sharply, catching a distant sound. Tires on gravel. Soft at first, then clearer, approaching from beyond the line of trees. Headlights appeared moments later, cutting through the darkness as a vehicle slowed near the cemetery gate. The engine idled, low and steady, before the door opened with a muted click. Footsteps followed, deliberate, measured, carrying across the quiet ground in a way that felt familiar, though not identical. Rex did not move his paws. Not yet. But his entire body leaned toward the sound, every instinct pulling him forward while the command held him in place. A man stepped through the gate, his silhouette outlined briefly by the headlights before they dimmed. He moved slowly, not with uncertainty, but with the careful awareness of someone entering a space that demanded respect. His coat was pulled tight against the cold, his breath visible in the air as he walked between the rows of stone. He stopped a few yards away from Rex, his gaze moving from the dog to the fresh grave, then back again. Rex, he said quietly. The name carried weight, but not the right weight. Rex's ears flicked, acknowledging the sound, but his body did not respond. It was not the voice he was waiting for. The man took another step closer, his boots pressing into the frost, the sound soft but clear in the stillness. He would not want you out here like this, he added, his tone steady, controlled, but edged with something else. Something like grief. Rex's gaze did not shift. His focus remained locked beyond the man, beyond the grave, toward the place where the scent still lingered, stronger now, undeniable. The man followed the dog's line of sight, frowning slightly as he turned his head toward the road. There was nothing there but darkness and the faint outline of trees swaying in the wind. There is nothing there, boy, he said, softer now. But Rex knew better, because the scent was closer. Not by miles, not by distance measured in roads and buildings, but by something deeper, something that did not follow human understanding. In the hospital room, Daniel's eyes flickered beneath closed lids. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried meaning. His breathing deepened again, a slow inhale followed by a longer exhale, as if his body was preparing for something it had not yet fully reached. The nurse stepped fully into the room now, her attention focused, her movements quicker as she checked the monitor, then the man on the bed. Doctor, she called softly toward the hallway, her voice controlled but urgent enough to carry. Back in the cemetery, Rex's front paw lifted. Just an inch. Just enough to break the line he had held for so long. It hovered there for a moment, suspended between obedience and instinct, between command and something older, something deeper. Then it lowered again, pressing into the earth with quiet certainty. Not yet, but soon, because the command was still there, and so was the one who had given it. And for the first time since the world had told him to let go, Rex understood that waiting did not mean the end. It meant the moment before everything changed. The night held its breath as if the world itself had paused to listen. Rex remained where he stood, but the stillness no longer belonged to obedience alone. It had become something sharper, something alive with anticipation. The scent was unmistakable now, threading through the cold air with quiet persistence, no longer fading, no longer uncertain. It did not belong to memory. It belonged to now. Rex's ears stood fully forward. Every muscle in his body aligned toward the distant road, his gaze fixed beyond the man who had come to retrieve him, beyond the grave that held no answers. The man watched him in silence, confusion settling into his expression as he followed the dog's focus once more. "Rex," he said again, softer this time, as if lowering his voice might somehow bridge the distance between them. But Rex did not respond, because the voice he needed had not spoken yet. In the hospital room, the air shifted in a way that no machine could measure. Daniel's chest rose with a deeper breath, the kind that does not belong to unconsciousness. His fingers curled again, stronger this time, the movement deliberate, controlled. His brow tightened slightly, a faint line forming as something inside him pressed forward, pushing through the quiet barrier that had held him still for days. The nurse stepped closer, her movements quick but careful, eyes scanning the monitor, then returning to his face. "Daniel," she said gently, trying the name like a key that might fit a lock. "Can you hear me?" For a moment, nothing changed. The steady rhythm of the machines continued, the soft hum filling the space between breaths. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, his head shifted. Not much, just enough to break the perfect stillness that had defined him. Back in the cemetery, Rex's body reacted instantly. His ears twitched, his head lifting higher, his chest expanding with a sudden inhale that carried something more than cold air. The connection was not visible, not something that could be explained or measured, but it existed all the same way it had existed on distant fields, in moments where distance meant nothing and instinct carried truth faster than thought. The man beside him took a step closer, reaching out again, his hand hovering just above Rex's back. "Come on, boy," he urged quietly. "It is time." But the words fell into empty space, because time had already shifted. Rex's front paw lifted again, higher this time, no longer hovering uncertainly. It remained suspended for a moment, the tension in his body building, coiling like something preparing to release. The command still echoed within him. "Stay." It had been the last word, the one that defined everything that followed. But now, something deeper rose beneath it. Not a new command, not a contradiction, something that completed it. In the hospital room, Daniel's eyes opened. Just a fraction at first, the world entering in blurred shapes and muted light. The ceiling above him came into focus slowly, the hum of the machines sharpening into something recognizable. His breath caught slightly, a small, involuntary shift that pulled more air into his lungs than before. The nurse leaned closer, her voice steady but touched with relief. "That is it," she said softly. "Stay with me." "Stay?" The word hung in the air, familiar in a way that reached deeper than the room, deeper than the moment itself. Daniel's eyes moved, searching without understanding, as if trying to place himself in a world that had continued without him. Somewhere in the distance, something pulled at him. Not a sound, not a sight, a feeling, a presence that refused to be ignored. Back in the cemetery, Rex's paw came down. Not backward, forward. The first step broke the line he had held for so long. The frost beneath him cracked louder this time, the sound sharp against the silence. The man beside him froze, his hand still extended, eyes widening slightly as he watched the shift happen in real time. "Rex?" he said, uncertain now, as if speaking to something he no longer fully understood. But Rex did not stop. The second step followed, then a third, each one measured, deliberate, his body moving with purpose now, guided by something stronger than the command that had held him in place. The scent grew stronger with every step, clearer, undeniable. It did not lead to the grave. It led away from it. The man stepped back instinctively, lowering his hand as Rex passed him, the dog's focus unbroken, his path set. "Where are you going?" the man asked quietly, but there was no answer he could hear. Because the answer did not belong to words. It belonged to movement, to instinct, to a bond that had never been broken, only stretched across distance and silence. In the hospital room, Daniel's fingers tightened slightly against the thin sheet. Beneath them, his breathing steadied, his eyes focusing a little more with each passing second. The nurse's voice faded into the background as something else took hold of his awareness. A memory, not clear, not complete, but strong enough to rise above everything else. A field, a command, a pair of eyes watching him with absolute trust. "Stay," he whispered, the word barely audible, his voice rough and used. Back in the cemetery, Rex reached the gate. He paused there for just a fraction of a second, his body aligned with the road beyond, the scent now pulling him forward with quiet certainty. Then he moved again, stepping out into the darkness beyond the rows of stone, leaving behind the place where everyone else believed the story had ended. Because for Rex, it had never ended. It had only been waiting for the moment to begin again. The road stretched out in front of him, dark and quiet, a thin ribbon of asphalt cutting through the sleeping town. Rex moved with steady purpose, his paws silent against the cold ground, his body low but not cautious, not afraid. This was not a search. This was a return. The scent guided him, faint but growing stronger with every step, weaving through the night air like a thread only he could follow. Behind him, the cemetery faded into shadow, the rows of white stone disappearing as if they had never held meaning in the first place. Because for Rex, meaning had never lived in the ground. It had always lived in motion, in breath, in the space between command and response. A car passed in the distance, its headlights sweeping briefly across his path before vanishing again, leaving the world dim and quiet. Rex did not slow. His ears tracked every sound, every shift in the wind, but his focus never wavered. Somewhere ahead, the presence grew clearer. Not just a scent now, but something deeper, something that resonated in a place beyond instinct. In the hospital, the lights felt too bright, too sharp against eyes that had only just opened to the world again. Daniel blinked slowly, each movement deliberate, as if relearning how to exist within his own body. The ceiling above him remained steady, unchanged, but everything else felt distant, like a memory he had not yet fully reached. Voices moved around him, soft, controlled, carrying words that did not settle. His attention drifted past them, searching for something else, something missing. His right hand shifted again, fingers tightening slightly, as if grasping for something no longer there. The tattoo on his arm caught the light, the image of the German shepherd sharp against his skin, a reflection of something that was not in the room. His breathing steadied, deeper now, more controlled, as awareness slowly took hold. But it was not the room that grounded him. It was the absence of something he expected to feel, a weight at his side, a presence that should have been there. His brow tightened, confusion threading through the quiet as his eyes moved again, searching. Back on the road, Rex reached an intersection where the scent split briefly, carried in two directions by the shifting wind. He slowed for the first time, his body lowering slightly as he tested the air, drawing in each strand of information with careful precision. Left carried the lingering traces of passing cars, oil, and distant noise. Right carried something cleaner, something closer. Rex turned without hesitation. His pace quickened now, no longer measured in quiet steps, but in a rhythm that matched the urgency building inside him. Not panic, not fear, recognition. The town shifted around him as he moved, small houses lining the road, porch lights glowing softly in the dark, curtains drawn against the night. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, sharp and brief, then fell silent again. Rex did not respond. This was not his territory, not his concern. His world had narrowed to a single point, and everything else fell away beyond it. In the hospital room, Daniel's voice came again, faint but clearer this time. Rex. The name left his lips without thought, carried by instinct rather than memory. The nurse paused, her eyes flicking toward him, surprise crossing her face as she registered the word. Rex, she repeated gently. Is that your dog? Daniel's gaze shifted toward her, but it did not fully settle. The question hung in the air, waiting for an answer that had not yet formed. He did not nod. He did not speak again, but the name remained, echoing in the space between them, heavier than anything else that had been said. Because it was not just a name. It was a connection. Back outside, the scent grew stronger, undeniable now, pulling Rex forward with a certainty that left no room for doubt. He reached the edge of the hospital grounds without realizing it, the building rising ahead of him in quiet contrast to the small homes he had passed. The lights inside glowed bright against the darkness, windows reflecting the night back onto itself. Rex slowed again as he approached, his body lowering slightly, not in caution, but in focus. The scent was everywhere now, surrounding him, rising from the ground, the air, the very walls of the place in front of him. It was not faint anymore. It was present, real, alive. He stepped closer, paws moving across the paved entrance, the automatic doors sliding open with a soft mechanical sound that broke the quiet. Rex paused just inside, the warmth of the building brushing against his fur, carrying 1,000 unfamiliar scents that layered over each other in confusing waves. But beneath them, one remained clear. One cut through everything else. He moved forward again, guided by that single thread, weaving through the empty lobby, past chairs and quiet desks, his path unbroken. In the room above, Daniel's eyes shifted toward the door, his breathing catching slightly as something inside him aligned with the movement below. He did not know why. He did not understand how. But the feeling was unmistakable. Something was coming. Not a memory. Not a thought. Something real. Rex reached the base of the stairwell and stopped, his head lifting, ears forward, his entire body attuned to a point above him. The scent led upward. His chest rose with a steady breath. The final distance now measured not in miles, but in steps. And for the first time since the command had been given, Rex stood on the edge of something new. Not waiting. Not searching. Arriving. The stairwell held a different kind of silence, tighter, enclosed, the air warmer but heavier, carrying the faint hum of electricity and distant voices. Filtered through walls. Rex stood at the bottom step, his body still for just a moment, his chest rising slowly as he drew in the scent again, confirming what he already knew. It was here. Not fading. Not distant. Here. His ears angled forward, his gaze fixed upward, tracing a path that no human eye could see. Then he moved. One step. Then another. His paws made soft, deliberate sounds against the concrete, each movement measured, controlled, as if he understood that this moment required more than instinct. It required precision. The scent strengthened with every step, no longer something to follow, but something that surrounded him, something that existed in the very air he breathed. On the second floor, a nurse stepped out into the hallway, glancing down at a clipboard, unaware of the movement below, unaware of the quiet approach unfolding in the stairwell. The corridor stretched long and pale, lined with closed doors and dim overhead lights that softened the edges of everything. It was a place designed for stillness, for recovery, for time to move slowly. But something in that rhythm had begun to change. Inside one of the rooms, Daniel lay with his eyes open now, no longer drifting, no longer lost in the distance between awareness and absence. His gaze remained unfocused for a moment, then shifted again toward the doorway, drawn by something he could not explain. The nurse beside him noticed the change, her movements slowing as she followed his line of sight. "What is it?" she asked gently, though she did not expect an answer. Daniel's breathing deepened slightly, his chest rising with a quiet urgency that had not been there before. His fingers tightened against the thin fabric beneath them, the small motion carrying more weight than anything else that had happened since he woke. He did not speak, but the name remained in his mind, clearer now. Rex. In the stairwell, Rex reached the landing and paused, his head lifting as the scent surged around him, no longer confined to a direction, but filling the space completely. He turned toward the hallway, the door slightly ajar, and moved forward without hesitation. The moment he stepped into the corridor, the environment shifted. The clean, clinical scent of the hospital pressed against him, layered and complex, but beneath it, the one scent he sought remained strong, unwavering. A nurse at the far end of the hall looked up, her brow furrowing slightly as she noticed the German shepherd moving silently along the polished floor. "Hey," she called softly, more surprised than alarmed, taking a step forward. But Rex did not break his path. He moved past her, his focus absolute, his body aligned with a single destination. Each step brought him closer, the distance shrinking until it was no longer measured in space, but in heartbeats. The nurse hesitated, then followed, her pace quickening slightly, unsure of what she was witnessing but unable to look away. Rex stopped outside a single door. He did not scratch. He did not bark. He simply stood there, his head lowered slightly, his ears forward, his entire body still once more. But this stillness was different. It was not waiting for permission. It was knowing. Inside the room, Daniel's gaze locked onto the door, his breath catching for just a fraction of a second as something inside him aligned completely. The space between them, once stretched across distance and silence, collapsed into a single point. The nurse beside him noticed the shift immediately. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice careful now, aware that something unseen had entered the room. The door moved slightly, pushed open by a quiet force that did not need to be loud to be understood. Rex stepped inside. For a moment, everything stopped. The hum of the machines, the soft movement of air, the quiet presence of the nurse. All of it faded into the background as two worlds met again. Rex did not rush forward. He did not break into a run or leap onto the bed. He stepped in slowly, deliberately, his eyes locked onto the man before him. Daniel's chest rose with a deeper breath, his eyes widening just enough to hold recognition, though it came without words, without explanation. Rex stopped at the edge of the bed, his body still once more, his gaze steady, unwavering. For a moment, neither moved. The space between them held everything that had passed, everything that had been lost, everything that had been waiting. Then Daniel's hand lifted. It was not strong, not steady, but it moved, reaching out across the small distance that remained. His fingers trembled slightly, the effort visible in the slow, careful motion. "Good," he began, his voice rough, unsteady, the word catching in his throat as if it had been waiting too long to be spoken. Rex stepped forward. Just one step, enough to close the distance. He lowered his head beneath the outstretched hand, pressing gently into it, the contact quiet but absolute. Daniel's fingers settled into the fur at the top of his head, the familiar texture grounding him in a way nothing else had. "Good boy," he finished, the words barely above a whisper, but carrying everything they needed to. Rex's body relaxed for the first time since the command had been given, the tension leaving him in a slow, steady release. His tail moved once, a small, controlled motion, not exuberant, not wild, but certain. Because the command had finally ended. Not with a new word, not with a signal, but with presence, with return, with the quiet understanding that he had not been waiting in vain. And in that small hospital room, under the soft glow of artificial light, the distance between them disappeared completely, leaving only what had always been there. The room did not return to normal right away. It lingered in that quiet space where something sacred had just happened, where even the machines seemed to hum softer, as if aware that they were no longer the most important rhythm in the room. Rex remained at the bedside, his head resting gently beneath Daniel's hand, his breathing slow and steady now, no longer searching, no longer questioning. The scent that had guided him across distance and doubt was no longer something he had to follow. It surrounded him completely, grounded and real, carried in the warmth of skin and the quiet rise and fall of breath. Daniel's fingers stayed in Rex's fur, unmoving for a moment, as if afraid that even the smallest motion might break what had been restored. His eyes remained fixed on the dog, not with surprise, not with disbelief, but with a kind of recognition that ran deeper than memory alone. It was not about understanding how Rex had found him. It was about knowing that he would. The nurse stood just inside the room, her hand still resting lightly on the door, her expression caught between disbelief and something softer, something closer to reverence. She did not interrupt. She did not step forward. Because there are moments that do not belong to procedure or protocol. Moments that ask only to be witnessed, not explained. Daniel drew in a slow breath, the air filling his lungs with more strength now, more certainty. His hand shifted slightly, fingers pressing a little firmer into Rex's fur, grounding himself in the contact. "You waited," he said quietly, the words barely above a whisper, but clear enough to carry meaning. Rex did not move away. He did not respond with excitement or sound. His tail moved once again, a small, controlled motion, the kind that held more weight than any burst of energy. Because this was not a reunion built on surprise. It was a return built on certainty. Time passed, though it no longer felt the same. The sharp edges of the moment softened into something steadier, something that could be lived in rather than simply felt. The nurse finally stepped forward, her movements careful, respectful, as if approaching something fragile. "He is not supposed to be here," she said gently, her voice low, not as a reprimand, but as an observation that did not quite fit the reality in front of her. Daniel's gaze did not leave Rex. "He is exactly where he is supposed to be," he replied, his voice still rough, but steadier now, carrying a quiet conviction that did not need to be argued. The nurse hesitated, then nodded slightly, as if accepting something she could not fully explain. Outside the room, the hallway remained unchanged, Lights dim, footsteps distant, the world continuing in its usual rhythm. But inside, something had shifted permanently. Rex adjusted his position slightly, lowering himself to the floor beside the bed, his body settling into a protective curve, close enough that Daniel's hand could still reach him without effort. He placed himself there not because he was told to, not because he was trained to, but because it was where he belonged. Daniel watched him for a moment longer, his eyes softening as the weight of everything that had happened settled into something quieter, something more complete. His gaze drifted briefly to his own arm, to the tattoo that had marked a bond long before this moment, the image now carrying a different kind of meaning. Not a memory, not a symbol, a reflection of something that had never been broken. The command that had once held Rex in place no longer echoed with the same urgency. It had served its purpose. It had carried them both through distance and silence and uncertainty. But it was no longer needed, because presence had replaced it. Connection had answered it. Daniel's eyes began to grow heavy, the strain of waking, of returning, pulling at him gently now. But this time, there was no fear in closing them, no sense of being alone in the quiet. His hand remained resting against Rex, fingers still lightly curled in the fur, as if anchoring himself to something that would not disappear again. The nurse adjusted the blanket slightly, her movements softer now, her expression thoughtful as she glanced once more at the dog resting beside the bed. She did not ask how he had gotten there. She did not call for security. Some things did not need to be questioned. They needed to be honored. Outside, the first hint of morning began to touch the horizon, a faint light pushing gently against the darkness, not in a rush, but with quiet persistence. The world would wake soon. People would move on, as they always do, carrying their routines, their expectations, their understanding of how things are supposed to work. But some bonds do not follow those rules. Some promises do not end when the world says they should. Rex's breathing remained steady, his body still, but not in waiting anymore. In presence, in peace. And as the light slowly filled the room, it revealed not something extraordinary, but something simple. A man and his dog. No distance between them. No command left unfulfilled. Just the quiet truth that some connections do not need to be explained, because they were never meant to be broken in the first place.